All right, so welcome everyone to the Winter Ice Skate Watercolor. It's actually kind of mixed media because we are going to be using not only watercolor, we use salt, and we're going to use a fine-tipped black pen. Sorry, I was concentrating on trying to get the right angle here. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do, obviously, is we're going to be drawing the ice skate in pencil. Afterward, we will go in with the pen, but first we are going to be adding the blue the blue watercolor. And actually, I think, you know what? I think we'll wait for the blue watercolor until we add the black pen. So let's get started though with our pencil. The other thing that I wanted to mention, I know most people were on when I mentioned it, but just in case, we're using a bigger brush for the background. If you want to get a smaller brush the um, for the ice, the snowflake on the left, I would suggest like either a round brush, like a size between 2 and 6, something smaller. My bigger brush is a size 10. I recommended between 6 and 10. I know Joanne said she had a 12. All the companies just, have them differently. So just something that's big enough, but it still has the point and that you're able to cover, a lot of space in a short amount of time with your brush. Okay, so that being said, we are going to start off on our ice skate here. So we're going to start at the top right, towards the top right corner of our paper here. Let me just move this up a little bit so you can see. You want to make sure that you leave room at the bottom as well for the blade, and also at the top. I'm just making this a little bit better. There we go. So let's get started at the top with the opening of our shoe. So it is at an angle. And here again, I always mention that you should draw lightly, as I always draw darker. So you can see it on Zoom. So I'm drawing the inside of our ice skate right now. So it's going to kind of look like that. The tongue part comes up here, comes right above. And we're going to start to draw it. That's the tongue right there. And we also start to draw a bit of the bottom part, or I should say other side of the tongue. So it goes upward and then down. Sorry, I made a mistake here in drawing it a little bit too far down, so I just erased it. And then we are now going to start to draw the middle part of the shoe. So let's do that. So the part that I'm talking about first is we're going to be coming over here where the laces are, and we're going to draw that section. Okay, so that section is going to come on out. It's going to curve. And then we're going to slightly curve downward and over for the shoe. And so that's going to look a little bit like this. Now we're going to just create this section for now. So this is the part where the laces actually are going to go over each other. We may have to change a little bit of that, but we want to get that sort of in, sort of down on paper for now. And then we're going to come back up here and we're going to start to draw the back of the shoe. And basically we're going to come down and then go down further. So we'll start up here. We're going to go down and we're going to start to bend outward toward the right. And then right here, there's going to be a bit of a bend. So it comes outward and then it's going to go inward just a little bit. This is the heel. And we're going to start to go towards the left side of the shoe and make it look a bit like a boot. So we curve. We're going to keep going, coming outward. So remember, this is the middle part of our laces. And so if we look above, there's our middle part. And we come over here and we're going to start to make a curve down to meet the bottom of our shoe here. So here we are starting back up toward the laces. And then we make a curve and go down to make that shape. Now, this is where you want to make sure that your shape is looking like, you know, obviously a shoe. You want to have an indent here and this to go out. And we also want to make sure that when we're finished with that part, that we create the actual shoe part here, like so. And it's going to look like this. And then it's more three-dimensional. So I'm going to give you all some time in order to make sure that you've got that. I may extend mine out a little bit. I'm going to make the tip of it just a little bit wider here. The other thing that you can now do to make sure that it's looking like you want it to is we can now go toward the bottom in order to make the seam here. So let's do that. And what we would do as well is there is a little bit of a bump over here too. So you can add that afterward. But let's create the shape of the boot, or I should say kind of the top part of it. So you see how I'm carefully kind of tracing around the shape, making sure that that there is, you know, a wide space here. And then it comes up in curves. So this is where, you know, you may have to make some adjustments. I'm going to make my top part here a little bit wider. And this is where you can continue to, you know, make sure that your ice skate looks boot-like. And as I mentioned, over here is where you'd want to have a little bit of the side of the boot. There's like a little bit of an indent, and then this kind of comes up a little bit. So I've erased a little section of that in order to make that look like that. And when you're ready, you want to add the portion of the base down here. I'm just going to fix mine just a little bit for here. Okay, so the bottom part comes around like this. We're going to follow it around. And it's going to end up about right here. Like so. I'm also going to make the part of the boot a little bit wider in this section in order for it to look more realistic. And that starts about right here at the curve, because your foot would come out about right here and it gets widest about right here, which is what happens to shoes as well. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to come up here inside the boot and we're just going to draw the inside with an oval, kind of like this. I'm going to erase this part since I kind of changed up the shape a little bit. So again, we came right up here. We made a bit of an oval that's showing just a portion of it. And we're now going to come down to the bottom. I wanted to kind of come up here, make sure we had that. We're now going to come down to the bottom to draw the blade. And then we'll come inside and we'll create the overlapping shoelaces. Okay, so let's come here down to the bottom. And we're actually going to start about right here. And so we're going to create the shape of our blade. And right now we're going to pay attention to negative space. So negative space is the space in between an object. So I'm outlining the negative space. It's the imaginary space that the shape of the ice skate and the blade is making. Same here too. This is negative space. And the reason it's called negative space is because it's not negative in a bad way. It's that it's a shape that you can actually use in order to create the exact shape that you want. So think of that as, it's helping you. For instance, like if I were to look at this negative shape right here, I notice that right here is small and then it kind of wings out like so. I may draw this space too big and then it may not look right. So I can kind of look and see, oh, okay, maybe this has to be smaller, and there the shape of the, of the bottom is a little bit curvy. Anyway, I just kind of wanted to show you that. So I just drew the negative space and it may look a little different. I may have to do something else to it, but for now, that's how it is. I'm also going to just add a little bit on the side here of the start of the actual, the blade. I couldn't think of what it was called. But then I want to come back after I start that blade. I want to come back and draw the other part of the blade. And the way I want to do that is, again, I'm going to look at the negative space. So I'm looking at where the shoe is and the shape of that space in between. So I see that that space in the blade, it curves and then it goes a little bit straight and then it kind of curves again. like so. You know, and we're going to make it look three-dimensional as well by adding right here the other portion of that blade. So just by adding that curve, it's going to make that blade look three-dimensional eventually. This isn't the blade yet. This is actually the negative space, remember. We're also going to go inside here, and we're also going to make the inside shape of the blade. And I think I might have to make this just a little bit wider. So I'm just going to fix that now. Okay, now we make our blade. We're going to start here on the left side. Our blade comes out at a slant toward the bottom, but then comes back inward, and then it's flat at the bottom. And you're going to go straight across like so. And then your blade here is going to come out and then come to sort of almost like a curvy point. Of which you are also going to add a little bit of the blade at the bottom. And just take your time. Just going to let everybody catch up if you need to. The next thing we're going to start are the laces. Okay, so we're going to go slow with the laces. So there is a bow up top, but we're going to add that last. And what we're going to do first is we're going to add the holes over here. So we're going to come from the top, but we're going to skip some space. And we're going to add our first circle. So first we're going to make these, and let me go a little closer now that we are kind of in the drawing phase. I'm also going to move this down a little bit just so you can see the laces. So what we're going to do is we're going to be curving around and adding our ovals. And so here's our first one. And I kind of like to add them as, you know, a little bit circular first, and then kind of like almost like a half moon, like so. So I made the first one a circle. You're going to make sure that you have some space in between each one. You are going to need to, you know, add on to that sort of half moon eventually. But really what you're doing is you're showing the portion of, and I forget what these are called. I looked it up a long time ago, and there's a name for everything. And I can't remember what it is, but eyelet. I think it is an eyelet, Nancy. Yes, thank you. I think it is an eyelet. That makes sense. We'll call it an eyelet. I like that. Since I have heard that term before, obviously, but it's been a while. And so as we're getting to the bottom here, we make one more for the straighter lace that's going to go across. Now, at any time, you may have to add more or you may have to subtract from one, and that's okay. But here is our first portion. And then from here is where we start to draw our laces. And so we're going to go over for the first one. And so, as you can tell, we haven't drawn the other portion of the rest of the boot over here. That's just going to be a little line. But first, we're going to do these. So what I like to do is coming out of the eyelets here, I made some of them going over and then some coming under, but I did most where they're kind of going over. Here is another one, although this one looks like it would definitely go over. And just sort of use your judgment. I'm going to move this one up to go under a little bit. You know, if it's too far away, obviously you want to make sure that it's going in the direction that makes sense. And then you can erase on the other side or wherever you need to. You can erase the little lines that make up the either your shoe or any line that doesn't make sense. And then from here, we actually start to add other ones that are crossing over. And so these are just crossing over underneath, coming from the other side. Now, if you want them to actually cross under, you can do under or over. I've done kind of a combination of each. Here's one that's coming from, and they're all coming from the other side. You want to make sure to add a little bit of a bump when it's coming from the other side so that it looks realistic. And then there again, make sure that you erase any lines that don't make sense anymore. So for instance, when there is a lace in the way, you want to make sure to erase any lines of the shoe. And then we are also going to come down here and make a little bit of a U shape so that it looks like the inside of the tongue, or it's actually the tongue right here, right? And here is the kind of inside shape of where the tongue is coming out of. And then we also finally have to make a little bit of the other side of the shoe showing like this. So again, we just sort of make the other side of the shoe showing like that. And then we're also going to add our bow on top as well. You can add the parts of the, lace kind of hanging down. Here's the other one. So as you can see, I'm drawing right on top of what we did before. So again, you will have to do some erasing so that the top part is showing. And then you want to make sure that the end of your laces has that little thing here. I'm just going to kind of show it up close. So there, that as well. Thank you, Liz. And I was sitting there thinking, that's called something too. Is that your son? Did he tell you that? That's awesome. I know. There are names for everything. It's amazing. I've shared this story before. In a kids class, we were drawing a giraffe for a painting, and I happened to say the horns, and a 7-year-old corrected me and said those are called ossicones. So those things that are coming out of a giraffe that I've always called a horn, and I don't know if anyone else has. There's a name, and it's ossicone. I think it's Ossicone. I think ossicone. I never heard of that word in my entire life, but I have never forgotten it since that 7-year-old told me about it. I thought that was so cool. So now I'll remember aglet. That is so cool. Thank you. Okay, so we are actually, let's see, I think we are ready to do the ink. Yes. But actually, before the ink, just in case anybody has, and I know we have some fine details, but we'll use the ink for those. In case anybody's pen is not water resistant, we're going to do the watercolor first. So let's do that. So we're going to dive into using our blue, and basically we want to also make sure that we have our salt at the ready, because how this is going to go is we're going to, get into the blue. We're going to make a space over here on the left for the first snowflake, and the one on the left, we actually kind of paint around it. So if you want, you can draw the snowflake over here. So what I kind of do is I kind of draw like the shape that I want so that we can kind of paint around it. So I kind of made like a star, sort of. And then what I do is I actually painted around that shape. Um, you can make it more three-dimensional if you want in order to make it that shape. But we're then just going to start creating the background. And so we just lay in some of the blue. Here again, you can add purple if you want, but you also want to make sure that you use some lighter spots as well, adding water to it. And this is kind of a quick, or should be sort of a quick section. Again, when we get here to the left, you want to make sort of a spot to create that other snowflake. And then start to kind of go around. You also want to make sure that it's very wet, because that's what's going to make the salt stick. Just go around. So here I am. I'm going to kind of paint around my lines here, and then later on, I'll erase them. And then obviously we're going to have a few minutes where we have to wait for this to dry. So we kind of have you can get up to get a beverage or use the facilities. But we're going to have probably a good 10 minutes to let this dry. And I also, if you have a hair dryer, you can get that, or you can just kind of fan it. But again, just cover the entire section, remembering to also go, in between. This is also where you may want to use, if you have that smaller brush, you may want to do that. I just go very slowly and carefully. And then also right underneath. And then you're going to throw some salt on it. Now, you can skip the part with salt if you don't want to. It's up to you. I like to do it for some added wintry effect. You do want to make sure, and again, you don't have to go crazy. Like I went over here to the left, and I did just a little bit here at the bottom. I didn't go crazy with it. You can. And then I did some along the right, a little bit up here too. Again, and if it's starting to dry, you want to just re-wet it with using some droplets. I just use my brush. But now we're going to wait a few minutes. Again, at least 5 minutes, I'm going to say. You want to make sure that you have a trash can nearby, and also possibly a clean paper towel or pieces of a clean paper towel to wipe this off. I've also had, I had a student once that used a clean brush, a clean dry brush to take off the excess salt. I thought that was really neat. I never thought to do that. So sometimes I implement that as well. So whatever you have at your disposal here, I am just adding a few more drops because I think it looks really good. But we're going to take like a 5 to 10 minute break. So again, if you want to get a drink or something, feel free. I'm just going to try and wipe off some of this excess salt around. I mentioned on, I know I've mentioned this before on an earlier, um, earlier workshops. What I use is, I actually use the bottom of a box. This is actually a hard seltzer box. And it's like the perfect size to fit the watercolor sheet of watercolor in. So I guess it's like 9 by 12-ish. And what you could do is, if you have like a cardboard box like this, it's nice because you can actually put it right in here, or if you have a bigger box, that works too. And then when you go to take off the salt, it's nice because you just have it in the box and it doesn't get everywhere. I've definitely had to do that because this room that I teach in is also my husband's office when he teaches from home 2 days a week. And we have a rug in here. So I try not to spill too much on the rug. And I have a rug underneath this too, but I've definitely spilled stuff, but this helps. Anyway, we'll give it another 8 minutes. And again, just let this dry. Mine is already drying pretty well because again, it's just it's still um, very cool in our house. So paint dries at a rapid pace. Also, what I'm going to do at this point is decide to create the snowflake on the left side. So that's something else you could also do while you're waiting. So you can do a few things. Like I said, you can get up and, get a beverage, stretch your legs, use the bathroom. At some point, you want to create the star-shaped snowflake over here. And so let me take this out of here to show you that. And so I'm literally going to use the blue and I'm going to start to kind of paint with it. Again, I make like a cross and then I make another one so it looks more like a star. And I'm going to go a little closer now. And I'm going to make it a little bit darker. And I like to add sort of like dots on the edge, on the end of each to make it look snowy or more snowflakey. And, you can get fancy with it if you want. I'm going to fill a little more of this one in too for the shape. And then afterward, like I mentioned, I will erase the pencil lines. And take a look to see if you want um, to add any more blue. Okay, it's almost dry. And I'm going to start brushing off some of the excess salt. I'm going to grab a dry brush. I really do like that idea. I actually have this kind of kids brush that I use. It doesn't have to be. I just like the shape of it, and it tends to pick up the excess salt very quickly. Now, here again, you want to make sure that it's dry so that you don't smear. Kind of smear it. Maybe work in little sections. Again, we still have some time. I'm just doing the sections that are dry. And the other thing you can do if you can't tell if it's dry, you can rotate it around and it'll still be shiny if it's wet. There's definitely a white spot right there, or a wet spot. That's okay. The part that we're really looking for to be dry is closest to our ice skate so that we can start in using our pen. The rest of it, you can still let sort of dry. You just might get a little blue paint on yourself. Yeah, it's a little bit here. But it makes a really nice wintry background. And in worst case, you can just kind of flick them off with your finger as well. And then, run your finger over everything, or a dry paper towel. That's good too, like a piece of a paper towel. Okay. And then make sure you wipe your spot of any salt debris before we get started on the pen. It's definitely frustrating to be putting your piece down and then you're using your pen and then you feel bumps. And with pen, it's hard to, correct that. So I'm just making sure that all my salt is gone for the most part. And then again, just, smooth your hand across as long as it's dry, just to feel for any little bits of salt. They definitely hang on there and you can't see them all the time. Okay. Every time I think I'm ready, I find another piece of salt. It's like the gift that keeps on giving that you don't want. Okay. Let me make sure my angle is right. I know I was moving around here. Okay. Okay, so we are going to get started at the top. And so let me show the other one as well. So we're going to get started right at the top, just where we did when we were drawing it. We're going to start with the inside. So basically, what we're doing at this point is we're going to be tracing around everything, and then we're going to come back and we're going to start laying in the shading. So tracing around the top here, the inside of the boot. I kind of go between calling it a boot and an ice skate. And we're also going to trace around the whole thing. And just take your time. And here again, there would be a bit of a bump when the skate meets the bottom part of the skate. Like right here. I'm going to go really close to show you. So what I mean is there's an indent and another indent, which is sort of bumpy. There. Okay. So we're going to keep going. We're tracing around the outside of everything. Again, just take your time. You're also going to make sure that you do the inside part of the blade and obviously the outside. Like I said, we'll go back and start adding all the fun details. But first, we want to make sure to do all the outlining. So when you get to the tongue and obviously all of the laces, just take your time, really pay attention to how things are overlapping. And remember, your pencil marks are just a guide. Sometimes you have to go back and kind of, refix something. And we are going to be erasing all the pencil marks afterward. But especially take your time with the laces. It can get pretty confusing. So just pay attention where things are overlapping and underlapping. And when you're ready, you can start to erase the pencil lines. This is not good. It can also show you, once you start erasing, where you haven't drawn.
These are really good.
Okay, now, how's everybody doing with theirs? And so we're going to start adding the fine details, or I should say the finishing details. I'll give everybody another 5 minutes. I know it's hard to, and I don't want you to go fast.
Wish I had more time to do it. Come on.
Oh, wow. That looks awesome. Renee, very nice. Or Michael, or both. It looks awesome. So cool. Okay, for those that are ready. So let me just spot up to the other one for a sec. So what we're going to do is we're going to come up to the top part and we're going to start doing some shading, kind of like scribbling a bit, making the darkest part up here. And then it's going to get a little bit less dark as we go. We're also going to add the stitching around. And we're also going to be adding shading in on the tongue in between where the laces are overlapping. And then we have shading around the tip, the point, and obviously around the blade and the bottom portion of our shoe. So let's get started with the shading inside the boot here. And so we're going to start off kind of darker right here. And then we're going to start actually making quick lines. And then we will overlap those lines by going in the opposite direction. So what you can do is do short strokes coming from the darkest part, and then you're going to rotate and go in the opposite direction in order to make that shading, and then you can even do it again. So that's called hatching and cross hatching. Cross hatching, or I should say hatching, is where you're making just fine strokes in one direction. And then cross hatching is where you're hatching in the opposite direction and you're crossing over your strokes. So we're also going to, after we've done that part, we're actually going to go down to the heel or the inside of the heel. And we're also going to hatch in there. And we're going to start right at the back part. And we're going to start with hatching. So you're going to see that my lines are coming from this part. And now we're going to go up and down. We're going to cross. And it's still not dark enough. And I'm going to go really close now so we can do this. So, and we're going to now go in the opposite direction, getting a little lighter as we come towards the viewer, and then go back again just towards the back. The goal is to have it be the darkest in the corner here, and then it gets a little lighter. You can go over it again if you want. We're going to do the same thing to these inner parts. So first we're going to hatch, and we're going in a slightly slanted direction, and then we're going to follow that around like so, and then go back up. We're actually going to stay with the hatching for this for now. We're going to go over it again, therefore making it a little darker. And then we're going to cross hatch here in the back. We're going to come down to about right here. And we're going to stop. And then we're going to come back over to this side, and we'll do a little hatching over here like so. So that basically this side is dark, this is all dark, this section. And when you're done with that, we're going to hatch over here, the inside of the blade. Again, just one direction. We're going to come to the bottom portion of the blade here. There we go. Wasn't exactly in in the camera. And we're going to hatch. Again, slanting all the way across to the other side. Little strokes close together. So that's one direction. And then we're just going to come back and we're going to kind of go in a straight line. Just kind of going through on top of it to make it a little bit darker. And the darkest part will be at the corner of the blade. Actually, at each corner of the blade. So on the left, you'll come back and add some more strokes so that it's darker. And then again, in the next corner and a little bit going towards the center. So again, you see that this blade is darker here and here. Sometimes I go a little bit underneath, kind of outlining the bottom portion of the blade. And while we're at the blade, we can add some kind of dotted lines. So that's just around the blade. Okay. And now we're going to add the stitching around, starting at the top. So we're just following close to, this area of the skate. We're also gonna turn and come down. And that's gonna bring us down to the bottom portion of the skate where we're gonna add a line in between, or I should say shading in between the shoe and the top portion of the sort of the sole of the shoe. So we go around with the pen and we're going to do the same to the bottom portion of it, kind of outlining on the inside. And we'll also do it to the heel. The shading that goes around is just going to be strokes, curved strokes. And with the heel, our curved strokes are on either side. So we don't really have too much happening in the middle except for maybe one or two. We also have some shading, some little lines going kind of diagonally coming from this portion because, or this section, because when the foot would be in this, after it would be in it, it would sort of leave like kind of a bit of an indent. And that's what we're kind of doing here, some shading for a little bit of the indent. And we're going to do the same on the tip of it, where it's going to go down the side in one direction, and then again, we add a quick cross hatch in the other direction. And I like to add two little lines here. Few more last details. We have a little bit of a line coming here. And then when we go to the laces, in the aglets, we're going to make the part dark where the actual lace is coming in. There would be a little bit of a shadow there on the side of the kind of aglet opening. So that's right at the base of where the lace enters. And then finally, we have some shading in between the laces here. And so starting here at the bottom, I'm just doing straight lines, straight little lines going in between each of the laces on the tongue part, just because there would be some shading there. And I'm going to do that going almost all the way up. But if you notice, I kind of leave a little bit of the space left alone on the right side. And then I add a little line at the top of the tongue, kind of like a crease, and then just two curved lines there. And let me think, I think that is it. So I'm going to remove my spotlight and I'm going to stop the recording, and so that all of you can show your work. Stop.